Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this webinar held jointly with IDX and TidalScale. To start it off, I'll have Vanessa Little from IDX say a few words.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We really appreciate you joining us. I know everyone's probably a little bit webinared out, so it's great that you were able to join us today, and I think you'll be pretty interested in what we have to say today. My name's Vanessa Little. I'm the CTO over here at InterDynamics, and for those of you who aren't familiar with who we are, IDX has been one of the best kept secrets in Canada. We're a solutions and systems integrator focused primarily on the North American market. And as a 27-year-old company, we have a pretty amazing track record of deploying really complex and innovative integrated solutions to the market in both the enterprise and telecommunication sectors. We're an innovation-focused company. So we've built an architecture and engineering team of some of the best minds that we can find. We spend a lot of time developing young people through university programs and co-op programs, and we make significant investments into research and development as well. Most importantly, we maintain a really robust ecosystem of vendor partners that we like to work closely with to develop these solutions. And we don't simply deploy other people's technologies. We work with their product and engineering teams in a constant feedback loop to address the requirements of our customers today and make sure that those features are being added to the next generation of those products. Next slide, please. So here are some of the highlights of the technology practices we've invested in and we've developed expertise in over time, providing some of these best-of-breed solutions. Enterprise and telco cloud, hybrid cloud, particularly with Google Cloud, both on and on-prem, as well as public cloud solutions with AWS and Azure. The software-defined data center and data warehousing technologies. This year, primarily, we have a very big focus on orchestration and automation, integrating with a number of partners there, and some pretty interesting solutions on edge deployments. The core data center deployment, management, and operations has traditionally been our bread and butter and where we focus a lot of our business and revenue on. And we also spend a lot of time with open source technologies and how they integrate with commercial technologies and to build a complete end-to-end solution. Next slide, please. So IDX Labs is an ongoing investment we make into solution research and R&D developments. We leverage these labs to make sure we stay ahead of the curve and provide some of these forward-thinking holistic solutions, as well as create and publish some of the discoveries around what's coming next. So we make a significant investment in these labs every year, and we refresh the technology. We spend a lot of time working with our partner ecosystem to bring them into these labs to make some pretty complex integrated solutions that haven't really been thought of before. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned previously, IDX is a world-class system integrator with points of presence to serve our customers both in Canada and the US. And we're an innovation-focused company with a business focus. We're an engineering-led organization where all of the principles of the company and organization come from an engineering background. And we've also put a huge focus on using technology to further your business needs instead of just focusing on technologies that are academically interesting. We focus on those technologies and how to apply them in a holistic solution to move your business forward. Next slide, please. So I'm really excited about the IDX and TidalScale partnership because, as I mentioned, we like to stay very close to our vendor partners, especially the ones that we find very interesting. And that's how we really stay innovative. And part of that is keeping an eye on those companies that are doing something truly interesting and groundbreaking in the industry. And I believe that TidalScale is one of those companies. I genuinely believe that TidalScale-based solutions could turn a big section of the IT industry on its ear, and it has the potential to force us to reevaluate how we roll out these large systems. So that said, I'd like to hand it over to Eric to tell you a little bit more about the solution.
Great. Thank you very much, Vanessa. So before we look at the innovative, cutting-edge TidalScale solution, it's best probably for us to look backwards momentarily at what traditional virtualization is. So traditionally, again, this would be VMware or Xen, KVM. Traditional virtualization is going to take a server, a single physical system, and it's going to slice that up. It's going to subdivide it into multiple operating systems. This is fantastic if you have many small workloads, small services, for example. And this was groundbreaking in the, say 15 years ago. It allowed for a lot of data center consolidation of smaller workloads. The problem is that over definitely the last 7 to 10 years, what constitutes a large system has exploded. So big data no longer fits in a single server. And so there's another solutions needed for, let's just say, solutions that aren't so small. And that's where we come in. So TidalScale is going to take those same 1, 2, or 4 socket servers, but 2 sockets is our primary, is our bread and butter. Really great value, really great performance, and good size. So we're going to take those building blocks, and the TidalScale hypervisor, we call it an inverse hypervisor, will aggregate them together. So rather than subdividing them, we're going to aggregate. So everything that's in with those systems, the CPU, the RAM, the disks, the networks, are all going to be presented to a single operating system. So a lot of benefits to this. Obviously, you can create a much larger system. You can create a system that grows. And we have a lot of technology partners that are joining us on this, as well as customers and investors. Just to be above board here, I'm a 26-year veteran of SAP. SAP is an investor through the Sapphire Ventures HANA Fund. So my background is in the enterprise workspace. But we have got a lot of customers and partners as well, besides the HANA SAP market. So you'll hear me say SAP a few times, is because that's my background. So I have 2 slides here, this one and the next one. This one is my technology slide. These are all the technical benefits that the system, the TidalScale software can bring to a company. The next one will be more of the logistics and benefits. So to go through this one, and I always say I'm not gonna read to you. So, but the first thing is it's fast. So what we're bringing is the ability to have a very, very large amount of RAM, tons of memory. So in-memory performance. So what we're doing is we're, especially for analytics, for databases, for any sort of large amount of data that's going to be constantly accessed. We're looking at putting all that in RAM and avoiding a lot of I/O. So what we're going to do here is instead of having to go out to disk, we're looking at going from our CPU to RAM as opposed to disk. So I always, in human terms, going from CPU running an errand to RAM, that's like a 30-minute errand. And if I have to go to disk, it's like almost a year, 10 months to a year errand. One, dinner's a little cold. The other, your family's left you. So that's really what we're trying to bring here, is that huge amount of performance gain by losing a lot of I/O. Easy and agile. Easy, these are all the benefits of a scale-up system, a traditional system. We're easy because we really don't change compute from this aspect. It's still a single operating system. You can use all of your standard tools to deploy, backup, manage. You just don't have to think ahead of time. How big is it going to be? Do I have to shard my data? So it's really just easy because you don't have to think too far in advance, and it's just like every other system you have. Whereas the agile, these are all the benefits of a scale out system. I can grow by adding more servers. Slightly different from traditional virtualization, where I buy one big server and I grow into it. Basically I have a lot of wasted space, and hopefully in the last day I use it all. No, here you can use your utilization very high, and as you grow, you can add more and more. Or we've had customers who actually want to subtract. They have periodic spikes in processing, whether it's for certain business events or cultural, holidays, for example, Black Friday. You can really move the size of your system with the demand on the system. We say cloud or on-premise to fit in with Vanessa's hybrid. We are a hypervisor, so we're not hardware in any way, shape, or form. So as long as we have bare metal systems, I can deploy those in a data center, so customer on-prem, can deploy those in a partner data center. So for example, a managed hosting, a data center provider, or a cloud, as long as I have access to bare metal systems, which you can in almost all major clouds today. And the reason we can do that, the reason we can move around so easily is we're using proven technologies. We're using standard technologies that are already in every single data center we've ever run into. So those are going to be standard x86 systems. So these are the commodity workhorse systems. I want to point out Lenovo is an investor, so they're definitely the first amongst equals. But we do run on any existing x86 platform, modern platform. And we're going to connect those systems together with Ethernet. We're not using InfiniBand or NumaLink or a custom ASIC or proprietary cables. So all the things that people have tried to do this in the past and made it proprietary, we're avoiding all of those. So this is just common, cheap, readily available equipment. We support Linux, any modern operating system that's Linux x86 based. We're SUSE and Red Hat certified. We support Oracle Linux, Ubuntu, FreeBSD, pretty much anything that's within the last 3 or 4 years we're going to be able to access. I had somebody ask me if I support something from 2009. The answer was no, but all modern x86 Linux operating systems we do support. And because we're not changing that OS, it's the standard ISO, I'm going to put that right on top of my software and go, no changes, no kernel, no special specializations. And so I don't have to change my applications. So your Oracle or Postgres or MS SQL or HANA will all run just perfectly fine out of the box. So if that was the technical benefits, but here this is the agility. This is, to me, the business benefit. What we're seeing here is customers, when they're going to go buy a large system, this is power, less and less people are purchasing those because they're proprietary and they're big and expensive. When we see people going to get a large workload like this, they're going to take months to assess how large a system they need. Once they do that, and I always say, even if they know after 2 weeks to cover their job, they're going to do a couple of months to make sure so they don't get fired if they're wrong. Procure and install. These are not sitting around in every data in every warehouse or distribution center. So these take a long lead time to manufacture, procure, ship out, get somebody to come out and install them for you. And then once you do get them, they're there 3 to 5 years. If you run out in 3 years, if you run out of space in 3 years, you get to start the party over. And if at the end of 5 years, you've only used 20% of it, you've wasted a lot of money. And we think this is just kind of a terrible way to do things. And the way we like to do it is we're going to start with procuring. We're going to grab a 2-socket server that's in my data center, or I'm going to get one overnighted from a nearby distribution center. And I'm going to start my operating system up. I'm going to start loading my application and data. And if I need to, I can go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 2, however many I like. I can move it around and adjust to meet my data sizing. And then my commitment, once I go productive, my commitment is, we say 4 to 12 weeks. Whenever I get my next system outage, my maintenance window, so Saturday night, Sunday morning, I can change it around. Just because we can change it on the fly with a few clicks doesn't mean we should do it Tuesday at 1 in the afternoon. I'm going to go through quickly and then jump into a demo. What we're doing is I've got these 4 bare metal servers, and you can see all of the resources within them. What we're doing underneath, to quickly pull back the hood, I'm going to boot our hypervisor, the TidalScale hypervisor software. And when those boot, all 4 of these systems are going to communicate over that 10 gig backend network. When they do that, they now are going to present themselves as one large server. The operating system that sits atop it does know that it's virtualized, but it thinks it's virtualized on a huge piece of hardware underneath. It doesn't know that there's multiple systems underneath. So we'll communicate with standard virtualization up and down, so between virtual and physical. And as far as this east-west, the inter-server or intra-server, or inter-servers, we're going to be doing that. That's TidalScale. We'll move the system around, move the threads in memory around, such that the operating system never knows it, but we get full use of all those resources. Probably the best thing to do is, real quick, I'm going to jump out and do a live demo. Always fun and exciting. So this is WaveRunner. WaveRunner is our management software, similar to vCenter for those who are familiar with VMware. And what I have here is I can see I have a pool of servers. So if I look here, I've got 15 nodes. So I have 15 servers, and approximately 7 of them are unused. So I always like to pretend I'm going to create a 200 gig server. Okay, these are small demo servers. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to go create a software-defined server. And let's say it's a copy of my production system. So we'll say copy of Edmonton prod. and it's 200 gigs. So I need to grab one. Okay, that's going to give me about 64. It's 164 gig system. I'll go three. Three gives me 200 gig. I'm going to get one extra just to be safe. I can always remove it later if I don't wind up not using it. I'm going to choose a boot disk. I can go internal disk or fiber channel. I'll put it on fiber channel. And then let's say this is a copy of my Oracle system, and I'm done. So it took that quickly. I've defined the system, and then all I need to do is boot them up. They'll boot in parallel, so the system boots always in the length of time it takes for the longest server. So if it's a 3-minute boot time for a 1 terabyte server, it's going to be 3 minutes for 4. It's going to be 3 minutes for 8. It's, again, in parallel. And once my software is running, so TidalScale is up and running, now we can launch our guest. And in this case, it'll launch the Oracle Linux installer ISO. And we can just come in here, and after a couple of minutes, we'll get a prompt screen to start filling it in. Beyond the scope of this demo, so I'm going to go back to the TidalScale screens. So now that we've looked at technically what it is and what we can, how it works, and of course, I can go into excruciating detail in follow-ups. If anybody does have questions on the mechanics of it, I'd love to go with you, deeper at another time. At this point, I always like to throw this screen up and explain. We keep talking about a single system, one system. Very rarely do we ever see a customer purchase one system. We have 7 use cases that we find our SAP or Oracle or SQL customers are going to use. And any one of these 7. Sometimes they have 7 and they'll have 3 or 4 landscapes like this. So you can have a rather large landscape. We have one customer that has over 120 landscapes. They have 120 systems spread out. So they have about 5 of these use cases done, about 20 different ways for various business units. So I like to point out that, people go, oh, just for one system, I don't know if it's worth doing this. When you're looking at doing this for, many, many systems, that flexibility really does help your go-to-market and as well as your ability to provision quickly. So we're going to provision quickly. What are we going to provision? Again, I tipped my hand early. I'm an SAP guy. I've got the hat on the counter over there. So SAP HANA, for those who don't know, is an in-memory database system. So SAP wrote it about 10 years ago. And what it does is it's going to take everything and put it in RAM. And so I like to tell people, if you had an existing SAP system that was based on, they call NEDB, a row-based traditional Oracle DB2 system, you may have a 12 terabyte on disk system. What HANA is going to do is it's going to compress that. So you might make that a 3 terabyte system. And you think, oh, 3 terabytes of RAM, that's not too bad. Problem is that when I load that 3 terabytes of data in RAM, if I only have 3 terabytes, it's read-only at that point. I don't have any wiggle room to change anything. SAP recommends doubling that amount. So I now have 6 terabytes as the recommended requirement from SAP. So I went from 12 terabytes of disk to 6 terabytes of RAM. And that causes some people consternation because that can get rather expensive when you don't have a solution like this that you can use smaller, cheaper components and deploy as you need, rather than go buy a very large system and burn a lot of money. So this is one of our primary use cases. We're actually, our founder, Dr. Ike Massey, former CTO of SAP Labs, was there with Hasso Plattner when HANA was developed. So this was his thought of, there's got to be a better way of doing this because hardware is just so expensive. And so to talk about that, SK Hynix, the #3 semiconductor manufacturer in the world, they had an existing HP Superdome, and they were actually fairly happy with it. I'm not going to malign the existing system. They were going to go purchase another, and they looked at it and said, well, wait a second, why would we want to look at TidalScale? And the answer was, I can give you $1 million of reasons why. So they did. They copied their production system. This is SAP S/4HANA, the latest, greatest SAP release. They put it on, they ran their top 6 transactions and reports, 1 in 4 transactions, the others are the reports. And we were actually performed 44% faster. That was fantastic, delightful, made me very happy, like a proud father. But this is what we were going for. This is, what we're always telling our customers is your ability to save, to deploy as required and grow as you need without running out. This is really where most of our customers are focused on, basically those savings and making the CFO happy. Speaking of making the CFO happy, I've actually had people say they like, I call this Oracle and her sisters. So these are all of our databases that are CPU licensed, core licensed. What we have found on these is that the ability to grow RAM without growing cores. So what we're going to do, if I look at this system, this chart here, if I provision a system and I look out in 4 years ahead, I'd say, how big am I going to be in 4 years? Okay, I'm going to need a certain amount of RAM, a certain amount of cores. I'm going to buy that well into the future. So I'm buying 4 years in the future, but I'm buying it today. So obviously, when you're buying future hardware, you're paying a premium because you're buying more than you need today. Not only am I going to buy more than I need, I have a bunch of cores, a bunch of Oracle licenses that are going to have to go on those cores. I have to buy all those Oracle licenses up front. Then I have to maintain them. I have to pay maintenance on them on year 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way through. What we're saying is that wouldn't it be better if on year 1 you could buy just what you needed today, and then every year you could look at, as my business grow, has my data grown, then I need more CPUs, more RAM, more cores, more licensing. So this is what we're seeing from a standpoint of 2 benefits. One is buy the hardware as you need it and license that hardware as you need it. One of the best cases, this is actually a Canadian customer, so local team, and they needed 3 6 terabyte servers. So they needed a prod, an HA, and a disaster recovery. They were in 2 separate data centers, but this is just, all 3 of them are next to each other here. And what they looked at was, it was a rather large investment over a 5-year TCO. This number was created by a company called Precision IT. It is independent of TidalScale and of Oracle. And we said, we think we could do better than this. And basically a huge cost savings by going into a TidalScale solution as opposed to an Exadata solution. The biggest one is the number of cores utilized. We're going to use much smaller number of cores with a much faster gigahertz, so 3.9 gigahertz. Part of this is due to the way RAM is allocated on Intel servers. If I want to access higher amounts of RAM, I also have to go into what they call L SKUs, or now it used to be M SKUs. And so I can't use a 4-core chip anymore. I have to go to a 20 or 24 core. Besides that is, it's a proprietary system with proprietary storage, as opposed to this customer is able to plug into their existing storage investment. The other big one is Exadata is not what we consider to be a common capability. So it's harder to find, hire, retain employees to monitor, maintain, and upgrade. So again, there is a huge cost benefit from using the TidalScale solution over the Exadata. And the last one I'll point out is that the other thing is locking. So this customer looked at it and says, I'm going to spend $44 million and Oracle has me for 5 years. There's almost no way I'd ever be willing to look elsewhere. Whereas with TidalScale, you're looking at standard commodity hardware that they can reconfigure if they wanted to take certain portions to go to, say, Postgres or to Sybase. It gives them flexibility without having vendor lock-in. And our last use case, go real quick, just to expand on that Oracle one more time. So how do we save money? One of the things I'm going to call out here is if I look at this customer system, I have this blue. So we say blue is bad, green is good. Blue is I/O time. My CPU is busy, but it's waiting for I/O. So it's waiting for something to come from disk. Whereas green means it's busy and it's actually doing work. It's making my company money, collecting it, or somehow doing something that I want it to do. So what we're going to do is again, by moving everything into RAM with more amounts of RAM, I'm going to take and eliminate a huge part, if not all of that I/O. So I'm going to drastically reduce the I/O. And what you'll see is imagine this chart, if all that blue disappeared, my overall CPU utilization would drop. So I don't need as many CPUs because they're not waiting around. I call this donating money to Larry Ellison. The poor guy's only multi-billionaire. He needs it. So not only do I cut my costs, but I also now have a lot, my I/O is gone. So my CPU is not waiting, neither are my users. So my performance goes up. So this is exactly how what we're going to do is look at what are we waiting for? What are those hot tables? Okay, I need to put more of those in RAM, get rid of I/O. I can now expand my system, my software-defined server, to whatever size I need to create a much larger buffer to keep all of those in RAM as opposed to going back and forth to disk. And so that's how we do the, twice the performance at half the cost. That's the reasoning behind that. And now the last business case, the last use case is data analytics. So I'm going to point out this is not high performance computing. So high performance computing is more, I need 10,000 cores and I want each of them to look at their own discrete 1 or 2 megabytes of RAM. For example, map reduce. And the reason why we're not focused on that market is because there are a lot of solutions in the high performance compute market, and many of them are open source. So there's no money for that. And it's a crowded marketplace. On the other hand, the ability to have a very large amount of RAM where I can load up lots of, especially time series data, where I'm doing constant comparison and analysis between different trends or different timeline series. Those are going to be compared back and forth in a myriad number of ways. So, if I have 2, it's 1 to 1. If I have 3, it's 2 to the 3rd, and I can just keep on growing. So the more trends or more series that I want to analyze, the more possibilities there are. I always tell people, the entire NBA, every single statistic for the NBA since the beginning of time is about 20 gigabytes. But when that was loaded into a HANA database for analysis, they needed 1.5 terabytes. So when you're looking at all the different possible statistical correlations, you need a huge amount of RAM. And the last thing you want to do is put those on disk because your I/O will kill you. So that's another place where, especially financial markets, Wall Street's, and analytics of any sorts are very interested in this. So to summarize, we've been patted on the back a few times, but by industry. But my favorite one is from Gordon Bell. Some of you may know Gordon as the founder of the mini computer from his work at DEC. But he's also the founder of the Microsoft Research Center. You can look him up on Wikipedia. And Dr. Bell was one of the early investors. And when he saw TidalScale software, he made this saying that we all love, which is, this is the way that all servers will be built in the future. And so this has really been a driving force for us of trying to make that vision happen, as he said. Well, that'll end up for me. Vanessa, I'll give it back over to you. Thank you for having me. Mute. You're on mute.
There we go. Thanks, Eric. So if any of this seemed at all interesting to you guys, let's talk about it. Feel free to reach out to us at info@interdynamics.com and we'll take a look at your existing footprint or maybe whiteboard a bit. We can walk through the financials to see how it's going to save money for your particular situation. We can look at your systems and maybe talk about doing some POCs on site for some of your workloads so you can get a look at how this solution would work for you. Anything you really want to talk about, I think this is a really interesting solution and it has a lot of applications for a lot of different use cases. So feel free to reach out and let's talk about it. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining today. And I think with that, we will wrap it up.